Some people wonder why I'm called a time traveler. Well, it's because I have my own personal time machine. Right here, it's the local museum. I can come from the present into the distant past without any problem. Come and join me. We all have ideas of what museums are. That place down the way has the artifacts. Well, there is an actual definition, and not from Webster's. The International Community of Museums, or ICOM, actually has their own specific definition. A museum is a non-profit, permanent institution in the service of society and its development, open to the public, which acquires, conserves, researches, communicates, and exhibits the tangible and intangible heritage of humanity and its environment for the purposes of education, study, and enjoyment. Museums go back a lot longer than 2007. In ancient Greece, they had the word museon, which meant place of the muses. It was actually more of a place of contemplation and philosophy than what we would recognize as a museum today. Thus, the Museum of Alexandria, founded by Ptolemy I back in the 3rd century BC, would not have really qualified in what we would recognize as a museum today. It would have been more looked upon as a university maybe, but some of the initial ideas were there. The word museum was revived in 15th century Europe, describing the collection of Lorenzo de' Medici in Florence. But it didn't really describe the building. It was more describing the completeness. Even though there is some ambivalence in the wording of the legislation of 1753 that established the British Museum, this legislation puts us on the road to what we recognize today as a museum, a place where we can come and enjoy the various artifacts and learn from their history. By the 19th and 20th centuries, the museum now denoted a building where people could come and see the various cultural items of their society. And as societies became more enlightened, more museums appeared. This is what happened here in 1965 when Helen Ford, Keith Adams, the mayors of both Alberni and Port Alberni, and many other people came together to bring us this museum. The museum has a long history in this community, and the archives is where it started. Today we have Marlene Dietrich with us to give us a bit of history on that.
I can remember being in the old fire hall on the corner of 10th and Roger there, before the archives came over here in about 1967. I think they moved here, and I know they were there in 1965.
Yes, I believe it was Helen Ford was one of the people who started it.
Yes, Helen Ford and Dorrit McLeod and Minna Hamilton and Vivian Thompson, some wonderful people that stayed with the archives for over 40 years. They came and volunteered every Tuesday and Thursday and volunteered. In fact, Lila Mackenzie used to drive over from Parksville to volunteer on Wednesday afternoon.
And what brought them together to see the need for an archive?
I think the museum had a lot of artifacts and this type of thing. I think there were things that were stored in the old post office basement, and it was a terrible, terrible environment for them to be in. So the archives in the museum got together and created one society out of the two, which became the Alberni District Historical Society. It used to be that one and museum. And the museum separated, and then the archives donated everything, all the photographs and everything they had, to the museum, and then we kept what they call the paper treasures.
So you're now working in conjunction with the museum?
Yes, we are two separate entities. We're two separate societies, but they were very lucky to have this space in the museum for the archives.
When somebody comes in today, what sort of things can you offer them?
Well, we need to know exactly what they're looking for at the beginning because we have so much information here. Genealogy is becoming a really big thing now, and we have a lot of birth, death, and marriage records. If anybody wants any clippings or historical information, we have microfilm back to 1907, actually, I think it is. And we go back a long way as far as the clipping files are concerned. We have all kinds of information here, but we need, and I must remember, we're the repository for the city. We have the city minute books up until amalgamation, and we have some of their old land records. So and 1,000 maps. So, and then the birth, death, and marriages, we have old obituaries and this type. So we can pretty well find anything that people want.
And the people that work here, they're all volunteers.
We are all volunteers. As a matter of fact, we've finally started to keep track of how many hours we spent, and we find that we've spent about 150 hours a month just in these archives with the people that come in and volunteer. And we're open Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we're open from 10 until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And during that time, we're trying to clean up a lot of the things in the archives. We're going through the old clipping files now.
You must have quite a love for that.
We do. It's great fun, and I just love kind of the history thing and looking through the old pictures and the newspapers. And it's hard to work because you keep reading the articles and saying, "Oh, I knew that person," and "Oh yeah, well she was a so and so." You know, you can always remember their married names and all this kind of thing. So it's great historical information on the valley. It's a wonderful thing to be doing.
I've come in and I've looked over some of the articles and I've just started reading them myself. It's quite interesting.
Yes, it certainly is.
Yes. Well, thank you, Marlene. Since I'm already at the museum, I'm going to drop in and chat with Jamie Morton. Good morning, Jamie.
Good morning, Gerald.
Why do we want to have a museum in our community, and what is the value of the collections here?
Well, we have museums because we like to save things. And ultimately, people have objects, photos, things that are important to them, things that somehow contribute to their life memories, what they remember about their families, what they remember about their environment, their jobs, all the things that surround us during life. And there's often mementos or things that are treasured by people for different reasons. It can be that it's something associated with a grandparent or a parent, can be something that's associated with a special event that took place. And what's nice is that these things often contribute to a larger sense of community memory too. So individually, for an individual or for a family, they save these things, they keep these things, and all of us have the trunk or the suitcase in our closet that is full of papers that might be interesting someday, or things that could be of some use to us someday, things that we keep or things that we think we might pass down to our kids. Particularly in a community like Port Alberni that has a fairly strong shared heritage. A large percentage of the people worked in the forest industry, for example. There's a large First Nations population that has a fairly, at certain levels, a shared experience of what occurred with the resettlement, with the coming of non-native people to the region and everything. For people that worked in the forest industry, for people that worked in the marine industries, for people that stayed home and took care of children and cooked and so forth, this is a shared community experience. And people have saved things that somehow inform this, that relate to this. The role of a museum, a community museum, or really any museum, is to save these things, preserve these things, and present them back to the larger public. So it's kind of the conversion from individual memories, individual keepsakes or treasures, to larger scale community keepsakes and treasures, making sense of the identity of the community, why we're here, what represents things that are important, critical values for the community. So if you look at the collections in a museum, and what a museum is supposed to do is to keep collections, preserve collections, present collections. That's the mandate always for a community or any other museum. But in the case of something like this, it's converting those individual memories, those smaller scale memories, into a larger sense of community identity, making it important to everybody. That's really important for two reasons. It's the education thing. Generations coming up won't know. A lot of people, a lot of young people in the Alberni Valley haven't worked in the forest industry, don't have that experience, haven't worked in the fishing industry, haven't dealt with farming or agriculture, but they can share some of that by coming here and visiting the objects and seeing some of the stories associated. The objects saved in museum collections become symbols, and it's their symbolic value that is actually more important than their material value in many cases. Some things are valuable for their own sake, for collectibles, but really it's what they tell you about what people did treasure, what people did save, what they donate to a museum, what they think is important to the community. You get enough people bringing in things they think are important to the community, and it does give you a pretty good reflection, pretty good picture.
So basically you're telling the story of the community and the people in it.
Through objects, through saving objects. In our case, we have the photo collection in the museum also, which is a key part of that. Everybody has their shoebox full of photographs and photographs that have been passed down and so forth. So that really is an important part. But yeah, all these objects are telling a story. And again, it's the symbolic value of them. You know, behind us here, there is some of the staved water pipe from one of the early water systems in Port Alberni. And people now go out into the bush and they find a little bit of this staved pipe and they say, what the heck is that? They come here, they can find out what it is and how it fits into the larger story of Port Alberni. So it's very much a way that people can share in the experience and what makes the community distinct by visiting the objects, by seeing the stories, by sharing in the experience that way indirectly.
There's a lot to a museum behind the scenes, such as preserving items, making displays, things like that, and choosing items. What have we got today for us, Kirsten?
Well, I thought I'd show you some baskets that have come in recently. One of the things that museums do is they preserve artifacts. So they want to keep them not just for the next 5 to 10 years, but we're thinking more in a 50 to 100 year span so that they will last for generations to come. But there's all sort of things at play. So we keep the building humidity and temperature controlled. We also control the lights. So this is an example that's come in recently and it's been exposed to a lot of sunlight over the years. So the patterns on it have faded a lot. If we open it up and look inside, we can see that at one time there were quite brilliant colors. But if you leave it exposed to light, they fade. So we want to preserve these patterns for as long as we can. So we keep them in a controlled light environment. And one of the other things that we need to take consideration of is gravity. So gravity is always working on objects. And in your home, you probably won't notice it in the lifespan of an object. But in a museum, because we keep them for generations, things start to take place. So in this basket, you can see the lid is starting to cave in here. That's just the effects of gravity pushing that down. So when we work with this and put it on display, we're going to stuff it with acid-free tissue so it will keep its shape and it won't cave in on itself. This one too, you can see it's just starting. And we can't really undo a lot of things that happen, but we can keep it from getting any worse. So that's what we do a lot of in the museum is preventive conservation, which is just maintaining things as they are so they don't get any worse as much as we're able.
So there's a lot of work to preserving various objects.
Preserving them, and also that works in contrast to presenting. Most museums have some sort of mandate to preserve and present. We want to preserve this and keep it as long as we can for future generations, but we also want the current generation to be able to interact with it, enjoy it, learn about this object, and that causes deterioration, right? Right now we're exposing these baskets to light because otherwise we couldn't see them. The best way to preserve an object is to store it well and put it in a cold, dark room and don't let people touch it. But that's no good for presenting it to the public. So there's always this balance between what's going to deteriorate and how you're going to present it.
That is a very fine balance to walk. Yes. And what else have we got here?
These are just some recent donations. Most of the stuff in the back room is stuff that's in process. So we have a number of sports jerseys that came in. In this town, we collect things that have a relevance to the Alberni Valley. And this town has a big sports history. And we feel that those are a nice complement to show off our history.
How do you determine what item might be better to display than, say, another?
Part of it is how delicate an artifact is. So can it stand being going on display? But also, what is it the story you want to tell? So sometimes it's not necessarily that this artifact is this particular importance, but we're looking to tell a particular story, and these artifacts will tell a particular story. In the vacation exhibit right now, we sort of based that originally on the Emily Carr to showcase that, but that has a number of paintings that are in the museum collection, some furniture from the collection, the McLaughlin Buick, the 1912 car, that's also part of the museum collection. And those each have a significance. We've kept them for a reason, but we've chosen to present them all together as a collection in that exhibit because they help tell a particular story.
I've stopped over here at the Industrial Heritage Society. The IHS, as it's known, is an integral part of our local museum, and they maintain all the various mechanical things from rolling stock to chainsaws to rail cars here. Anytime the door is open, feel free to drop by. But remember, they're not just a museum, they are a restoration shop. So when we go in, watch your hearing, because it can be loud.
The Industrial Heritage Society, it started more than 30 years ago, and its mandate was to restore and operate vintage machinery and trucks that belong to the Alberni Valley Museum. There's a wide variety of skills amongst the members, and so they tend to work on the stuff that they know or used to work with, and then we get some pretty beautiful restored artifacts out of it. Yeah, some stuff comes in, it might look like it just came off the back of a scrap truck, and to the uninformed or the unaware, they'd think, oh, take it away and send it to Japan and turn it into a new car. Yeah. But no, our guys, they can turn that pile of scrap into something beautiful.
I was going to say, these actually look really nice.
Yeah, but you can see they need some...
And here is one of those vehicles at the very beginning of the restoration process.
The fire truck, it didn't even come here as a fire truck. Two of our members were up at the Comox exhibition 2 summers ago, and somebody said, hey, do you guys need an old 6-cylinder engine? It might go with this old truck. And we don't generally say no to offers like that. And then we learned that the engine came attached to an old fire truck. And then when we started looking and scraping off the moss and the dirt, we could see the letters PAFD, Port Alberni Fire Department.
The fire truck may be one of the most recent projects to arrive, but it is not the biggest or the oldest.
That's the oldest thing in the building. That's 1882. It was built in the east side of North America, and it was a first-class passenger car called a parlor car. Yeah, that's a massive project, that one. I mean, there's some pretty fabulous woodwork in it, although it was in pretty sorry state. And the idea is to restore half of it so people can see the idea of restoration before and after.
And this is what the after part of the restoration looks like. One of Port Alberni's first fire trucks, looking like it's ready to hit the fire station and out to a fire.
If it's not the first one, it's one of the first ones, yes, and that one was restored by our member Ben Skevink 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah, it's an example of what you can end up with some careful work, and that's what happens here. Everybody contributes their particular skill. There's thousands of hours go into several of the projects. When you add everybody's work to it, yes, they 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 hours.
And those 5,000 hours are put in by people who love the challenge and have pride in our community's heritage.
There are some people who have retired to Port Alberni in the knowledge that this place is here. They're people that love restoring vintage equipment, and they know this facility exists. We are known in the restoration community for what happens here.
Part of the job of our museum is collecting, presenting, and preserving items. But also some of it includes research and the interpretation of items for both young and old. Today we have Shelley Harding, who is going to fill us in a bit more on that. Shelley, You do a lot of work with young people in education. How does the museum present things for the young people?
We do that through having the information available in our exhibits, having traveling exhibits that present information about our collections in a different way. And then it's also through programs. So we do a lot of programs here for children and adults and families. We have an education program for schools that have specialized programs for children in grades kindergarten right through to grade 12. We also do some preschool programs, and with those we select different themes or different subject areas that meet the curriculum in the BC school curriculum, and we also select different parts of the museum to focus on aspects of the collection that would meet those themes. So they're interactive programs where children come and see the artifacts, but they're also actively involved in the learning. So they're learning by doing. We have activities and crafts and role-playing around the subjects that we have in the museum. That's what we do for schools.
Do you have things for older people?
Absolutely. So we do specialized evening lectures sometimes for adults on special, on different topics. We do our family day programs. We have birthday parties and murder nights and sleepovers. Those you may not think of those as education, but it is using the museum in different ways, and it's still involving the museum collection, and we're still looking at objects in the museum, but making that accessible and fun in different ways.
And I'm sure even for just an individual coming in to research a particular topic, you'd have resources?
We have a lot of resources here available. This particular museum is what we call a visible storage museum, in that all the information about every one of our artifacts is available through our catalog book. So right away people can find out what we know about each artifact, and that's both education and research and interpretation all in one there. And we also have our own research library of books and publications that are unique to museums and also unique to some of the objects in our collection.
It's really critical to try and preserve those community memories, again, for the purpose of education and also for visitors to the community. And it's important that we do maintain that and present that to the visiting public, as well as to the local residents, the people that are in the community. It's really a difficult task also. When you look around us, we are a visible storage type museum, which means that the majority of the objects are on display constantly. It's an ongoing task to try and take care of those, to ensure that they are preserved. Part of the mandate of a museum is that we are supposed to preserve the things in perpetuity. We're supposed to keep them forever. So the idea is when somebody donates something, it should be expected that if they come back or they send their grandchildren back 50 years later, it's still there, still telling its story, still serving its symbolic purpose. So it's really critical to have facilities, first of all, a museum structure and building and climate control and so forth that maintains levels of light and humidity to keep the objects in good shape. It's also really critical to have professional staff that know how the objects need to be taken care of, know how to keep track of them, the registration, the paperwork, and also who know how to present them. Because from time to time, we've got our temporary exhibits always, usually 2 a year that we set up, 2 major on-site ones and more off-site ones. And it's really important that somebody is able to take the objects and, just like you said earlier, tell the story using the objects. It's a way to present in a way that can be easily understood by any visitor what the stories we're trying to represent are, what the community is made up of, who it's made up of, what the economy is about, and again, the values that sort of inform and make Port Alberni a distinct community.
it kind of gives everybody a pride in the community too, knowing from where we've come and to where we're going.
Very much the case. If you don't know where you came from, they always say, you don't know where you're going. And it's true. You know, people need to reflect on how they came to be here, what their personal choice was for coming here maybe, how that fits into the objects that we're showing here and the stories that we're presenting here. When you talk to people whose grandparents maybe immigrated from Britain or came from the Indian subcontinent or came from China, or for First Nations people that have been here since time immemorial. But their stories are ones that need to be shared with other members of the community to understand, and make sense of what their past is like, what the shared experience of the region is like, and what it can be moving forward for us.
Thank you, Jamie. I have a very deep interest in history, and books and internet help me a lot. But when the topic is a local topic, I come here to our museum. They're a great resource, and I hope you'll come by and make it your resource. I'm Gerald LeBute, your local time traveler, and I'll see you next time, whenever in time that may be.
Sing a song.